Let's start. Okay, we are going in. The live stream is starting. The live stream on the channel has started. I need to copy the link to the stream. And here we go. So if anyone wants to join by link, here it goes. I hope you're hearing me just fine. Let me find and paste the link. Okay, gonna take some people. So, what's our plan for today? We're going to cover the basics, go for some analysis of basic FX references, some fire references, then study the basics of the motion, and after that we'll probably break down some animations and do some fire effects. If anyone manages to do some animations on stream, we'll go over these animations. I'll give you some feedback, and besides this, you're always welcome to ask me questions and send the references. So here we go. I forgot. Yay! So we've started, and I can finally start. Let me grab the chat. Hope you're seeing me just fine. Okay, so fire. Hope that fire fires well. What are the basic principles of animating fire? Oh, Tushar is sleeping. I heard that he haven't slept for like 22 hours, and I was like, holy crap, dude, go and sleep. So, yeah, I hope we won't see Tushar here because it means he hasn't slept. Okay. So, starting with the forms. There are different ways of stylizing fire depending on the scale. There are more rounded shapes that you can find in more smaller, more quiet fire. Depending on the style, you can experiment a lot with fire shapes. So anything like that may work. More definitive shapes. Even this may work as fire. We'll see later. Overall, though, there is some kind of more basic fire language which goes by combining straights, curves, and particles breaking off. Fire essentially is just a chemical reaction, but we are not that much interested in that aspect. We're interested in the way it moves, and that essentially just the fire moves along the air currents, okay, no matter, and as it goes, it gets a little bit colder until it becomes several particles, and they disappear quite fast. So particles that break apart from the main mass usually disappear fast. As you can notice, for this kind of fire, we've got a nice arc, a nice wave motion, and that is one of the keys to animating fire. So we've got two basic motions for the fire that we'll use all the time. We've got the mass, it goes up or to the sides, it goes even further up. then it extends to the point that there's no way it can hold as a single mass, as a single entity. It breaks apart, new masses rise, these masses become particles, they disappear quite fast. Usually they don't just move in a single direction, they usually rotate, twirl, change the shapes, and all that stuff. So this is one way of thinking about fire, and this is mainly the ultimate way to understand it. Another type of motion that occurs in fire is wave-like motion. So if you don't want to break a lot of particles apart, you can just whip the fire like a wave. So it goes 1, 2, then 3. So it goes to this side, rotates, switches to the other side, goes in the opposite direction, goes in the opposite direction, and the same thing happens. So it goes in this direction again, and we repeat the same cycle. So this is one type of motion, the second type of motion, and there is the third type of motion, that is flicker. So the fire can flicker, which is, well, understandable. And I haven't shared the screen here because I'm dumb. Yeah, I guess on YouTube is fine. Hope you're fine with YouTube. So third type of motion is flicker. The flicker is basically when only the tip of the fire changes a lot, and we've got a lot of particles breaking apart very fast. So let me grab some references for flicker. And it is a very fast motion. You can get it quite easily on like 4 frames, and it looks quite interesting. So maybe we can just show that. I'll switch windows, and here we go. So we'll go for the flicker. Gonna grab some fiery brush. So this kind of shape, then it goes like this, for example, then it goes again and goes 1, 2, 3, goes all the way up again. Flickers. And you can add a lot of variations here, add the movement to to the main body to add more nuance to the motion, and that will look more interesting like that way. But that's essentially the flicker. So we can add even less frames here for the particles, and it will work just as fine. We can break shapes apart. You can add pauses and so on. So this is flicker. So we've got three main motions. So flicker, wave, and just mass motion in general. So this is the most general one, and it works all the time. So this is less general one, and wave motion is also mostly present in some anime animations. Let's try that. I don't know if my computer can handle 2 frames at a time. We'll see. Okay, for now it kind of works. So we've got 3 types of motion. So this is mass motion. This is wave motion, flicker, and if we're talking about smaller fire, like candle fire, there are some kind of types of motions that we haven't seen. For example, rolling fire. So for the rolling fire, it kind of rolls around in a very subtle manner. Let me show that quickly. So instead of doing this, we'll have a candle, very fast candle, and we'll try adding some nice rolling motion. This motion should be quite subtle. If you make it too noticeable, it will look too artificial. So it may kind of compress, turn on the other side, become larger here again. Slow down at the top to make a nice contrast in terms of speed for the motion. Okay, let's smooth it out. Add 1 frame in between here. So this is a bit too artificial and too generic. I definitely see that. So this way we should make it more subtle. It's a very slow, delicate movement. It may kind of slow down here. Too many frames here. A bit too on the nose, but still. This is the main principle. It should be a very subtle motion. So the rolling motion. Back to it. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So how we get more complex motions? We got more complex fire motions by combining these 4. But this is basically for the flames rising in one way or another one. Depending on the animation and depending on the scale of fire, you may get larger fireballs and giant like streams of fire. They act a bit differently because they actually have a lot more volume. So the fire actually has volume and thickness. So it's not like a flat plane in reality. But this is not very apparent when you're considering something like this or this. However, when we are talking about huge fire, like this kind of fire, then we'll have to take this into account and consider that the fire is actually not a flat scene, but it has some volume. So if you've got some fire source, and we've got a rising fireball or like a fire breather, then we've got an internal layer, and essentially in this example we'll show the volume of the fire, so it should follow the form. It will curl inside and all the stuff. So this is for the basics of fire. Now let's dive a bit deeper in these basics. So the first thing to analyze are good references that make use of timing, spacing, and all the stuff to show fire. It's quite easy to animate a wave, but if you're animating a wave of fire, one thing that you want to consider is actually the timing, spacing, and the rhythm. So let's look at some good fire examples. So this is animation of Alex Redfish, and you notice that it has a very good sense of energy, spacing, and timing. Let's analyze some of that to get a sense of how I approach analyzing references in general, and in a sense how to approach analyzing fire animations. So you can notice that there are two scenes in this example. So this fire is mostly based on the wave-like motion, and it has some particles breaking off. There's not a lot of them, so it's mostly on the second principle we are talking about. So it goes 1, 2, 3, and this is a wave going through the fire. It happens. Okay, so it is essentially a wave going up, going like that, going like that, damn, going like that, going like that, like that, like that, and so on. Next thing that I consider is spacing. So how fast it goes. Does it have slowdowns and accelerations? So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, accelerating, accelerating, accelerates towards the top, and then decelerates at the top. So I've got that. Now let's analyze the other side. So for example, start here, start here. We're starting with the second portion of the masses going up. They accelerate, go up, slow down a bit at the top, and slowly disappear while rotating slightly. And the same thing happens with every edge. So you see that it slowly rotates just a bit. Again, it accelerates towards the top, decelerates at the top, and then the mass disappears. And the same thing happens everywhere. You can notice that here. And you see the rotation's a nice curve that is created by the holes in the fire. So when the fire is quite small, you don't get a lot of holes there, because obviously the scale is small, therefore the mass keeps more intact, more as a whole. However, when you're dealing with bigger fires, uh, bigger flames, you'll have much more holes and much more variations. So in terms of animation, this is essentially what you'll see in any fire animation. So you've got mass movement, you've got some kind of wave animation, you've got some nice acceleration and decelerations, and that's very important to remember, that you don't want to keep everything too even in effects animation in general and in fire animation as well, because if everything will be absolutely even in terms of time and in spacing, or in terms of forms and shapes, it will become boring and too repetitive, which is very bad for effects usually, as we want to keep them a little bit chaotic and organic, closer to their nature. Let's look at some other animations. So this one mostly shows us the mass movement principle. So I've got this kind of mass. It slowly starts to go up, grow up. The hole starts to appear. The masses move up. They extend. And the side decreases towards the top. So we've got 1, 2, 3. It extends just a little bit. Then the hole opens. The fire mass decreases. And you can see a nice difference in the shape. So it's not symmetrical. It has some kind of asymmetry, and it keeps it more or less interesting despite its relatively small size and amount of detail. Same thing here. They all look quite alike, but they are just a little bit different to keep you in it and to keep you interested. When you have several fire animations, so you can see it here that it is the same fire, but they adjusted the timing. So if you have a good fire cycle, you can just adjust it by several frames and make use of it somewhere else, and it won't look too repetitive, again, if it's not very short, because if it's a very short cycle it will be quite obvious. So mass movement looks nice, nice blurs, nice glow. Very nice fire animation, but let's go over the basics. So to create some simple rise in fire animation, you don't need a lot of things. You just need to start with some kind of base, some kind of basic form in mind, and a solid understanding of the spacing. With effects animation in general, you have to keep track of all the edges, because every edge is connected to the object that you. So essentially, every edge is just as far as any other edge, so that you should keep track of all the motions. And unlike in character animation, we don't have to keep it the same. You just have to keep the design recognizable and aligned with the previous frames most of the time, and that's it. Let's put some holes there. let's start to break this form apart. So again, I add a little bit of that rotation. In this case, it's clockwise. Let's have a slower motion at the bottom for now. And then we'll spring it into action. Then add the hose faster. One, two, keeping the rotation to keep it interesting. Yeah, you can do that, but it's way better to understand the motion in general, because the circle part, the circle trick, helps you do the timing, but as you get accustomed to the shapes, it gets you less control, essentially, because you stop thinking about the more specific fiery type of, like, you can do flicker with circles, you can do a combination of flicker and wave with circles, but after time and time it's way easier to think about the wave as it is and as it moves here more organically in a way. Doing circles is good when you're starting out to understand how the spacing works in general. So I guess that's it. So I would advise trying out circles, but at the same time also trying to animate more with fire shapes as they are, and trying to understand how the shape language of the fire works in general and what interesting waves you can apply it to. And at this point it is just smoke. Okay, let's see what we've got on 24. And let's add some frames at the beginning. Would be interesting to keep it more here to keep this nice motion. And we can keep this mass bigger to make more contrast in terms of shapes. And the smoke part can actually be way slower. Okay. Let's settle this. So, again, we use wave-like motion, we use masses, and we keep track of all the spacing. So essentially, the most important thing is to keep the changes in spacing more or less, I'd say gradual. So if you're going for acceleration, then you should keep the acceleration going for some frames. So if you are going for deceleration, the same thing happens. So this is deceleration. What doesn't work is keeping it like this, or suddenly stopping it and continuing. So if you interrupt the spacing, if you interrupt this kind of motion that you're going for, this means a very fast change in something. So another force entering the picture, and so on. But everything has its mass and everything has the initial speed. So for example, if you're trying to stop the object and change its direction, you have to apply force, and it will change direction gradually. That's why this kind of spacing doesn't really work well for effects. It may work a little bit better if you are working with limited frame rate, because essentially you're skipping frames at which the motion may start changing. But overall, it's better to keep your spacing more or less logical in this regard. Like here we go from this kind of spacing to acceleration and deceleration at the end. It is especially important with slower motion, because in fast motion you don't notice the difference between frames that much, but if you're going for very slow motion, you'll notice that the forms looks a little bit shaky and the motion shakes a bit. Let me, for example, show the motion with this shakiness. So we can go with slow acceleration and with gradual motion. Then we go 1, then we go faster, then we go even faster, just a bit, even faster, way faster, for example. Slow down. Slow down even more. And even more. You see that we get very nice kind of motion, a nice kind of weight. So let's mess it up. Instead of going like this, we'll try to break the motion in some frames and see how it goes. So instead of acceleration, we move nothing. Then we go like this, and it accelerates faster than the next frame. Goes like that. Again, let's keep it closer to this frame. Mess it a little bit here. Go like this. Let's see how it goes. So it shatters a little at the beginning, but you don't notice a lot of differences. However, if we mess up more of the frames here, the motion will become different. So the start of the motion happens in a different place, and it seems like it hits something here instead of moving normally. Like it skips a bit, skips the frame. And yeah, it's essentially what's happening here. It skips some frames. And if you do that to effects, this will look very unnatural. If you miss up 1-2 frames, it's okay. But the more frames you mess up in terms of spacing, the shakier and more glitchy the motion will look. That's why you'd better keep some kind of gradual changes in your spacing. That's it. That's it for that one. Let's save it. Naming it like Okay, ideal. And break down more references. I really like this kind of avatar, the first avatar fire animation, because it has a more unique and rounded style of fire. You can notice some swirls, some spirals in the middle of the fire, and they look very pleasing. But the best thing about this reference is the motion of the fire, especially when he moves his hands. So the fire, it's not a single entity, and the different parts of the fire are not connected to each other. All that matters to them is air current. So if you move fire, it stretches, it changes its volume, and it may even die out on the source for a while. So if you're moving something very fast, for example a candle, the fire may die out while it's moving. So for example, it was like this, then you move it very fast, the fire dies out, but there is a large mass of fire here, and then when it settles in your hand, you slow it down again, it may burn again. This kind of thing. And the avatar shows exactly the same scene with good design and good delay. So there is a delay between the motion of the fire and the general motion of the character. Let's look at that. So we keep the upward motion here, and we see that we have some kind of consistent spacing. So you can see the spacing is quite consistent. It's a little bit of acceleration, but not much. But then he moves his hand, but the fire slowly drags behind until the next frame. So the particles that went flying up before he moved his hand will remain with the same motion. Because fire is not connected, that means that these particles are not influenced by his hand motion. That's why they'll just move up. However, he has the source of the fire, so the fire moves along. And these particles that were emitted, bye-bye Gelagro. See ya. You can always see the stream in the recording. So these particles are not influenced by the particles emitted while they were dragged along him, are going to move exactly aligning to the motion. So as the fire is lighter than air, it continues moving up, while also moving in the direction of the hand movement, and this creates a nice arc. And you can also notice the spacing here. It's a very nice motion. And again, as it catches up, the fire lights up again, as his hand and his bending is the source of the fire. Again, these particles are not influenced by his hand motion because they were emitted before he moved. So they just continue going up, mostly, but the particles emitted right when he was making the motion continued trailing him with a delay and moving up, which creates a nice arc. Nice arc. So let's show it more cleanly. So we go 1, we go 2, we go 3, we go 4, we go 5, we go 6. You can notice a very pleasant arc appearing at this point. And this is the wave motion, essentially. This is a big large wave of fire. And the same thing happens here. So this is a wave of fire. You can treat it as a wave. Again, as it catches up, it lights up again, emits fire, then the holes start appearing, the hole here, it continues moving up, the hole expands, the fire particles break off the main mass, slow down and disappear. And we repeat the same thing. Another interesting and very good thing about this animation is fire shapes. So they almost never repeat the same shapes twice, especially when he's moving his hand, because he's moving it at different rates and different speeds. So when he's moving his hand slower, we don't get this extreme trail of fire. We get a very small, pleasant one, very subtle. And while he's moving his hand very fast, we get a very swift, big kind of swoop of fire at the beginning. Very nice animation. Props to the Korra team. So, let me close this one. Another example of very good fire animation with a small animation. So again, the fire follows the overall arcs of the object and of the motion itself, and it drags behind, keeping particles in the air. You can notice that the fire expands quite a lot when it's moving. Compare that to the original scene. Yeah, here. It expands as it has more oxygen to burn, and that allows it to expand. And let's track some particles. So how individual particles in this fire move? It goes from here to here to here and disappears. So it roughly follows the motion while slowing down along. And again, very nice arcs that repeat the motion. Again, as it has some momentum, it continues moving in this direction just a bit. So we don't have the fire following exactly on this curve. It goes like this. Again, it overshoots slightly because it still has the momentum. And at the top. Again, it continues moving and creates a very nice, intricate motion. Not many frames, not very detailed animation, but still very nice. Well, the smoke is quite detailed, to be fair. Okay, next up, So if you've grasped the basics of fire animation, then we can break down some more complex animations. Essentially, when you're dealing with huge amounts of fire, it is very much about the design of it and about the design of build-up, charging, and changes shapes. For example, in a fireball scene, it's important to keep it rotating and moving in some kind of way. For a stream of fire, it's important to keep the inner shapes interesting and to move them along the source, along the direction of the force. So this move forward, and again, they don't just move forward, the form changes, so you can see new mass appears. This mass changes its shape just a little bit to create something new. So this goes here, this one goes here, and so on. In this example, we see this principle, but it's not a very long animation, so there is not much. So this part goes here essentially, this part moves slightly up, these masses go to the right, and so on. So let's close that one. So these are Formatics Retrofish again, and they show the mass movement in its glory. So essentially you can make a lot of different fire animations and look up very different styles of fire animation. If you keep some kind of characteristics of the fire, like the glow, the overall direction going up, and all that stuff, then you can essentially make it look like any scene or experiment the shapes in any ways. So let's switch up to Clip Studio again. I'll create a new layer and we'll talk about the designs of fire a bit. So for smaller flames, there are different styles of fire, as I said. So we can use this kind of shape, and the important thing is to choose which kind of inner layer we want. So there are several types of approaches. So first is some kind of shape in the fire that's not touching the contours, and this just stays inside. So this is just one approach. It's quite stylized, and it's very useful for more flat fire animation. So if we want to have more volume, we can create more complex shading and touch the surface of the fire. So for example, we can infer the form, so this is more rounded, this will be illuminated, and we're essentially creating the form inside of the fire that should mimic some kind of volume. That's why I'm essentially imagining some kind of shapes, and for example these shapes have more rounded structure, so essentially it is some kind of three-dimensional objects layered on top of each other, like banded pyramids or cylinders. And this will add volume to our fire. Another one is adding different types of shapes that are distinct from each other inside of the fire. Another one is illuminating the upper part of the fire. So let's break it apart slightly. Because in reality, if we want to have a realistic fire, we have the source of the fire, I don't know, something like that, something like that. So near the center, near the source, there is no oxygen, so there is not much fire here. So it starts near the fire, but it doesn't actually touch the source here. By chance, something like that, for example, which is a very simple example. So the same principle can be applied here using gradients and stuff. And if we add glow here, it will look more convincing. And with the glow we can even do a very simple thing, which is you can do just white fire, which means it's very bright, too bright for the lens to capture. And with this bright fire we can just throw some colored glow and it will work just fine. So this is the approach for the smaller flames. For the larger flames you need to keep some kind of inner structure and to have a variety of shapes, a variety of forms to play with. Let's do this. We don't need you. We don't need you too. And let's play with this yellow. We can work again with the lighter hue, giving it more interesting shapes. So this is one flick, one kind of flame. Then I'm trying to create, not with you, some kind of interesting inner forms, adding the direction of the flame and emphasizing that with the inner volume. So each layer of colors that you add should carry some kind of meaning and should add something to the effect. So you shouldn't just repeat the contour. It makes it look even more repetitive, so better not do that. Can add in some smaller flames at the bottom that can't reach the top, add in some particles at the top, and so on. Then again we can experiment with the coloring, with the color in general. Again, with bigger flames they get cooler at the top, therefore the temperature shifts and the color shifts too. With the smaller flames, the center of the flame will be less bright and the parts at the top will be brighter. However, with big flames, this doesn't work. It's the opposite. And let's do the same with white layer, so it goes down. Something like that, for example. You can go even crazier at the top, at the very top. In terms of color palettes, the best thing is studying references, studying real fire, and studying fire and anime in cartoons. Everything works. Like that, for example. So, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3. For the trails, you want to keep some kind of interesting wave-like motion, while also keeping the shapes interesting. For example, let's do some random shape studies. So 1, more interesting. Break some particles apart. In terms of shape language, I recommend Kazuhiro Miwa for more anime styles, Hiroyuki Okuji, Alex Redfish, and some other good effects artists. Also, it's quite comfortable, especially in Clip Studio, to use lasso tool for fire animations, because it allows you to see the volume as you draw and also saves you some time. So like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's it for basics, the very basics of doing fire. And again, let's switch to the animating part of scene. So this is more complex fire animation, and is mostly carried on fire design rather than animation itself. So essentially, it is just trail animation. There is not much physics behind it, but it has very nice fire design, and you can see how the shapes in more volumetric fire are created. So we have some kind of nice bulks, almost like explosion like fire. We've got the shapes, the 3D shapes on top of each other that you can break down and analyze. And I can see that we've got a layering following the form. Yeah, it's from Hiroyuki Okuji or something like that. I'll link it in the video, and I can link it here as well. Let's play it one more time. Yeah, I really like this animation in terms of volume and fire structure. Okay, I can't find it in the moment. How does it start? With fire going on. Okay, never mind. I'll sound it later. So, you can notice the volume of the fire, and that essentially we get this kind of more rounded, bulky forms, and the fire goes in the opposite direction of the motion. So the source is emitting these fire shapes, and then they go 1, 2, and so on. So it comes to front. You can notice that these follow the form and go down slightly, so they rotate around the sphere. And the trails are quite static, they only move, but in terms of design, not much happens here, or in terms of motion. So we need this kind of shape language and adding the volume to it to make our animations look huge and believable. So if we want to have more volumetric fire, we have to keep that in mind. Let's throw all that away and do a bigger fire. So for example, we can start with brighter hues. Again, consider the overall forms and shapes. Essentially we're doing this kind of thing, and it's overlapping. So again, we're following the forms. So this is the form, this is our form, and each layer should follow it and enhance our feeling of volume and space. hammer form here. Just trying to make it more interesting. Like this. Again, I'm mostly just keeping the volume and the shape language in mind, which you can do if you study references, study some real-life fire shapes, like how fire bracers do fire tricks. Other thing is keeping the composition interesting. So we've got bigger shapes, some smaller shapes, and a nice variation in shapes. For example, like this. Then again, you can notice that they added some texture and gradient to make it more interesting. Like here, you can definitely see the texture. You can see the texture on the explosion, which makes it even more interesting, and the gradient as well. Just helps it hit harder. You can have more variety in the forms here. For example, go more crazy like this. Emphasize it with right here more, and it will look just as fine too. Okay, one. And gradients. Where have you go? Okay. Select everything. Of course, it's better if the gradient follows the form completely, and you better do that, but even a quick change, a quick simple gradient may add a lot. just add some brightness, some glow to the parts of the white flame. And if you add some overall glow, it will look even more realistic. Just don't overdo that. I usually pick a warmer and less bright color. So if the fire is red, you can do dark pink or dark red. If the fire is yellow, you can pick orange or red. If the fire is white, you can pick anything will work. So something like that. You can play with the forms here or anywhere essentially, and create a larger fire. So moving on to the animation part. Here, as you can see, goes one, this goes forward, this part goes back, and again don't forget that it doesn't just move straight. The masses can displace one another, displace each other. They can break into different forms, like here it breaks into two forms essentially, 1 and 2. And if you've got the big fire, then it most of the time rises like that. So shape like, shape 2, and it will fold on itself. Go up, go up, go down, swirl, rotate, inside. So that's it for now. How we going? So it's 1 hour in. I've got some more references to break down. We'll do that. And after that we're gonna animate a bit. I'm gonna take a 5-minute break, set everything up, and see you 5 minutes later. Oh, okay. Death Sniper. Does fire have a rhythm of its own, or is completely random? So, on its own, the fire doesn't, like in reality, the only rhythm fire has depends on the wind. So if there's no wind, no nothing, the fire doesn't really have a rhythm. However, if there's wind or any as in like actions influencing the fire, if there are other forces, then the fire will move according to these forces. In reality, of course, when you're animating fire, you don't have to simulate physics or something like that. You just have to make it believable. And to make it believable, you have to keep the inertia. So when an object starts moving, it can't stop in one frame. It will continue moving, it may slow down, but the motion doesn't stop instantly. The second is motion, upwards motion, because fire particles are lighter than air, but again, they don't have a lot of mass, and they don't have a lot of momentum most of the time, so they can be easily moved by the wind. So for example, these fire particles are rising up, but if the wind suddenly starts blowing, they will like accelerate for 1-2 frames, and they will move according to the direction of the wind. So they will start moving a little bit, so they continue moving up, but it would do the direction of the wind, accelerate, and then move with the wind in the direction of the wind. Short videos. I'm thinking about making short videos, but that's essentially making a course for now, and I'm already teaching a course. This stream session allowed me to hang out with all of you guys and help you learn and find stuff that you want. I consider doing small tutorials and more focused lectures, but it takes time and a lot of organizing. So yes, but not this month and probably not until summer. I don't know. So 5-minute break. Just gonna play some great fire animations that I can find, and I will take a break. Where is my favorite fire animation? Oh, this one is good. This one's good. Very good fire animation. Okay, back at it. Let's break down some great fire animations from Christian Mays. Damn, what are you doing to me? Okay. From Christian Mays. Let's see. Damn. Okay. Should be okay now. Should be. So again, these animations are very stylized and it's still fire because of the particle motion. Yay! Welcome to the stream, Lewis. And yeah, bye bye, DC. You're welcome. You're always welcome. We'll have a recording, so that's fine. So, for this animation, it has a very nice build-up and the changes in the motion. Let me grab all the animations here so we can analyze it, and we'll start. So, 1, 2, hope you can see that. Damn. Okay, so we've got the build-up. So notice that the arc is rotated in this direction, and then we change the direction essentially. Then we change the direction once again, while keeping the motion to the lower right corner. Then we slow down, but the inner forms continue the movement, so that creates a nice contrast between the start of the motion and the slowdown. So you can create a rhythm or a contrast of timing and spacing in your animations by mingling and like changing between slowdowns, accelerations, fast speed, slower action, and so on. So in this example we start out fast, change shape very fast, then slow down, build up, and only move the inner forms. So we keep a nice arcs for all the parts and they keep rotating, and the main mass doesn't move much, but the inner parts, the inner layer, moves much faster. Then again, we stop this motion, but the particles continue moving in the directions that they were originally moving, and we create a new mass and a slightly different spot and change the shapes quite fast, but continue moving the particles in their original paths. Then again, change the shapes, create particles, particles move in their respective directions, but the overall shape goes in this direction, stretches, squashes, stretches, again slow motion, fast motion, stretch, squash in the opposite, stretch in the opposite direction. Again, we first fire off the beam, then we get a circular fire, and we repeat it. So this is very stylized animation for the build-up, and you can experiment with it a lot. Like, it's not a Bible that you should follow, you can totally change it quite a lot. Let's look at the next animation. So again, it has this nice contrast between slow motion and fast motions. Let's look at it frame by frame. It's still Christian Mays. So first frame, the fire going to the screen, from the screen, inside the screen. Then we've got a hit. It spreads across. Again, keeping the direction mostly consistent with the particles, and you can see that they kind of follow the form and continue moving. Then again, another hit. It spreads across, very fast start, slows down, the inner forms continue moving, then we slow down a lot, change the form, moving slowly and consistently. So again, we're alternating between faster motion and slower motion. And this, as the fire follows the surface, it follows arcs of motion and the surface. In this case, we have a very good use of perspective. So it starts out here, changes the shape. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 to the camera, leaving the trails off, continue the movement with the particles to have something coming to the camera and something coming off the camera, and then we continue the motion with the particles. To make up for the very fast motion of the ball itself. This one, very nice. Let's look at it. So let's break down. So very fast start, as it hits the surface, it explodes, goes off, and slows down while continuing the motion. So one spreads across even more, but slows down, shapes go up, start breaking off into particles, slows down even more, and so on. So it's essentially very fast start, then you continue the motion way slower, but the inner shapes move slightly faster. And it's a general rule, so if you have a very fast motion inside the shapes, you should go a little bit slower on the outside shapes, otherwise it will be confusing. Let's break down some real life effects. So this is MeURFire, a very good fire YouTuber. He has fire swords and I love his stuff. Okay. Switching to the fire. Damn, I can find it. Okay. Switching to the fire stuff. So, let's analyze the motion frame by frame. So the fire moves in the direction of the sword, but with a delay. It increases in size, and I can notice that it has some kind of curvature, some kind of motion in this kind of arc. It has inside shapes. Let's look at them more closely. I'll grab a screenshot and we'll look at the shapes inside the fire. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. So what's the volume of this fire? Essentially, you get the basic shape, and this is one kind of shape. This is another shape. You can notice some smaller shapes here and there. So the overall mass is very, very bright. But you can still notice the overall form and structure of the fire here. And if you can analyze the reference like that, and then analyze the motion, you'll get pretty good at effects quite fast. So this is the overall form. Here, for example, here, like that, and so on. And again, notice the interesting patterns in the shapes here. You can stylize it even more to make the most out of it. So let's return to the video. Then again, you see that this shape, it rotates. It twists and rotates while going up. So it is rotating slowly at the bottom and moving quite fast up at the top. And you noticed it all over the place. So it is moving quite fast, it's fading out, it's rotating and twisting, and that makes up for an interesting animation and design. And again, it follows the overall volume of the fire. So fire is not flat. Again, let's look at this one. It is quite fast. So it goes 1. The trail disappears as it goes. Again, if the motion is way too fast, it can't keep up with the fire source, and it gets blown away. Again, it swirls and rotates, folding up inside, creating this nice shape. So it's not just coming straight up. And you see that it starts quite fast, slows down a bit. Again, 1, 2, follows the form, expands a bit, slows down, changes the shape, keeps rotating and folding, and disappears following the volume. You can see the arc of the movement here. Very nice. Again, it doesn't just follow the shape, it doesn't just follow the arc. And at the end, I wanted to see this one. So this is a fire stream going. You can use this for a dragon. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it expands and goes forward. You can notice that this shape is going in the opposite direction a bit, and again it rotates in that direction. Then the mass gets transferred, and again you can see that the parts of the fire move in the opposite direction. Goes up, swirls from the center to the back, rotates in the air while expanding a bit, and then kicks up, swirls, and turns into particles. So you could notice a lot of the scenes that we've talked about, but essentially what was happening. So get a fire coming in this direction. We start off like this. This mass doesn't move much. This mass goes a little bit behind. This mass keeps here. The fire expands. Again, new masses appear. The masses before that keep moving, rotating, folding. Then and so on, and then it starts losing the momentum in this direction and going up faster as it's lighter than the air. Next up, Fire from Fire Force by Hiroyuki Aokaji. Very nice fire design. You can notice at least 2 layers of color, a nice gradient, a nice black hatching, adding it a lot of the ash kind of vibe. So again, we keep following the same formula. It has a little bit of wave motion. It mostly has a lot of mass movement. Let's look at this one. So that's how it goes. And let's look at that frame by frame, analyzing the spacing and the forms. So we start off like this, go up, accelerate a bit, accelerate faster, go out of frame. With the next one, next mass coming, goes up even faster here, accelerates up. And the same happens with smaller masses like this. Gives 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 acceleration. This change is a little bit too much because we slow down here and suddenly accelerate it, so I would make it that way probably to add up to the acceleration. Break it off into particles in some places. Let's look at a different part of the fire animation here. So again, the fire follows the surface of the body. The particle breaks off and move up to the right. And here we have a fire, a yellow layer that goes again to the right, and we got a fire crawling to him. So get 1, starts moving, moves slightly here, so it's 1, 2, moves just a little bit here, starts moving with sharp shapes, catching up with smoother shapes, and again slowly crawling, slowly going over his body, while the shapes here essentially follow this kind of cylinder. So it was 1 goes here, then goes here, and then it disappears, so it's very fast for animation on 1, 2, on 2s. But you can notice the motion of the particles quite well. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. With bigger flames you can get quite chaotic. It's very important not to make everything move exactly the same, because it will look very unnatural. It's very unnatural for the fire to move the same with all the parts, with all the flames. Again, start, 1, 2, 3, going up, going up, turning into particles, continue moving up, and you can see quite consistent spacing here. Same thing here for the house. Then again here, the same thing happens. All the principles are the same, and it is one of the styles of coloring that I was talking about. So it has main shape, and it's brighter around the corners, around the sides. Well, let's look at this animation in general. You can add sparks, additional flames, all this stuff. It will make the animation more interesting and complex, while not actually adding much to animation in terms of time you actually have to spend animating it. This is also quite good, not in terms of motion, but more in terms of design. It has multiple layers, and it's more over volumetric fire. So it has distinct flame shapes in there. Brighter layers. Interesting shape language. Again, concave, convex, keeping it interesting. Essentially keeping some kind of wave-like motion in mind. Okay, okay. So, time to question break. Yeah, Fire Force is FireFX animation heaven, for sure. That's definitely. Hiroyuki Okaji, damn, for Hiroyuki Okaji and Miwa, Kazuhira Miwa, have done a very good job at animating fire. So that's definitely right. Besides this, do you have any questions on flame animation? Maybe some kind of principles, some kind of specific fire animations you want to understand or you want to animate? Or some kind of animation questions, FX animation questions in general you want to ask? Are there any? Everything is new, is good, because you can experiment all you want and you don't have anything to follow. And experimenting is always fun when you're studying animating. If that's so, if nobody has any questions on fire effects, we can practice some fire animations, we can do some small animations. Okay, let's do some fire scenes. Let's set some scenes on fire in the best way possible. Yeah, you can upload some of your works for the review. We'll do the review on stream. Review. You can probably break down some of the Korra fire animations. Mob, can you upload it like MP4 or I don't know, MOV file or anything? I don't want to download it from Vimeo. It's not a problem if it's just a little fire animation. Yeah, I'll do some fire animation here and then I'll take a look at your work to feedback. Let's make it wild now. gotta check YouTube questions. No questions. Let's look at that. Slightly too fast in the end because we haven't finished the motion. Hey, Ringsaw. Bye bye, Jix. See you later. Okay, that's it for this animation. So we gotta do a breakdown and wrap it up. This what was an hour of animation, maybe even less. And that's it for this animation. Export it. Oh god. No problem. You're always welcome. Thanks for the thanks. Okay. Can't load the work for the breakdown. Break it down and we wrap it up. Damn. When you will start working? Yes. This file. This file. Okay, let's see. Let's see. So this is your fan animation mob, which turn off the volume. So, for the fire punches, here it's better to build it first as some kind of mass. Again, probably worth adding some kind of shapes inside it. Adding motion blur to them too. You can take more general form. And here you either do this or you, and I'll keep it more in terms of forms, so it just stops and follows him, and there's not much in terms of the motion of the fire itself. Same thing here. You can add way more follow-through to the animation, and it's better to have more variety in terms of form language for this stuff. Don't forget that the fire lingers a bit and follows a little slower than the motion of the character. Okay, let's throw away the frames that we don't need. Let's wait for my PC to cache it so it can actually move. Oh yeah, it feels more better now. Okay, so keeping the overall forms. Don't forget that the fire will probably cover some parts of his arm. Let's see. Yeah, it's not Discord slow. My PC is slow. And I will probably add more build-up to that. More than it is here. We need more difference in volume here and in motion. if he's shooting directly at the camera, then don't forget that the motion will be a little bit different. So the problem is adding a little bit more anticipation, changing the shapes more, finding ways to add more interesting shape language here and there. So again, anticipation, more build up, more shape change, and especially more shape change things at the end. So without that, it seems static. And you can work way more with internal forms and internal shapes. So adding a second layer and animating it. Same thing for the kick. 1, 2. You hold it way too long on this frame and you don't move the fire at all. So it seems static because it is static. And it doesn't follow the curve of his head. Don't worry, you'll get through that. It's just that you need to pay attention to all these things. And you'll get better. See how these sharp shapes help to indicate the power and the motion. Because he's Zucker. And because it's animal logic, everything is perfect. Okay, let's add way more to that. Oh damn. Water would be the worst. So again, follow the shape, follow the motion, add some interesting shapes, and don't forget that it should go like that. Hi Manus, how are you doing? Bye bye. nowhere near perfect, but yeah, that's it. So this one and the previous one. No, 45 to 75, 72. This one being 1. And I guess that's it for this stream for today, for today's breakdowns. So we're wrapping up. If you have any questions, you can ask them. Any suggestions as well. If you don't have anything in mind, we can wrap up just now. This was a fun stream. We've dealt with some of fire effects animation, not all of it of course, not even near, but I hope you have a general idea of how to approach fire now and what kind of things you can do with fire. Fire can be fairly complex, but again it can be fairly simple as well. It all depends on the size and on the approach that you take. How the fire shifted forms and slowed down after some iteration. You mean this animation? So when you are changing directions, you should start by slowly altering direction. So it goes up, it continues going up, but slowly shifts to the right. So it keeps that initial momentum, that initial force, but also starts to slowly change the direction. And then with each frame you can change the direction faster and faster until you completely change direction. So it all comes down to building it up, starting with slower changes and then accelerating the change. If you do it this way, it will always work out in one way or another. You just have to find the right spacing and right timing to make it work. It always comes a little bit with experience, but essentially, yeah, start changing slower, then you can make faster changes. And if you're working on lower frame rate, like 12 frames per second, 8 frames per second, then again, you can use fewer frames to change directions, but essentially the principle is all the same. Hope that answers your question. Anything else? Fire wizard, not fire avatar. Oh god. Fire lizard. Okay, I'll wrap up the stream on the YouTube